Did Hitler have any plans to carry out the final solution outside Europe? What about the Jews that lived in North Africa? Did the Nazis have any plans to invade British Mandatory Palestine and wage a war of extermination over there? Did the German policies against non-European Jews differ from the final solution imposed on the European Jews? Let's explore. Good to have you back on the channel. If you're new on this channel, I'm Stefan, I'm a Dutch history teacher and I love to make videos about history for you. And if you find it interesting, well, what are you waiting for? Consider subscribing and hit that notification bell. You can also support me financially via Patreon, PayPal, via Super Thanks, or you can buy me a coffee. In January 1942, the Wannsee Conference took place. High-ranking Nazis agreed on the final solution, the systematic extermination of the Jews in occupied Europe. On 8 of Eichmann's list, we see the European areas. But did the Nazis envision similar plans to Jews outside Europe? Let's look at France. Here, they made an estimate of 700,000 Jews living in unoccupied France. Did they mean the French colonies in Africa as well? In recent years, historians claim that the Nazis did envision similar policies for the Jews in North Africa, the Middle East, and even in Shanghai. Other historians point out that such plans did not exist, but that if the Nazis would have been victorious, such policies would eventually have been carried out. We must notice that many statements of high-ranking Nazis regarding the final solution refer to European Jewry. On the 18th of November 1941, the Reich Minister for the occupied Eastern Territories, Alfred Rosenberg, endorsed the complete eradication of Jewry west of the Urals, i.e. the eradication of European Jewry. Hitler demanded that the Jews disappear from Europe. 27th January 1942, and a few days later, on the 3rd of February, predicted that the Jews will disappear from Europe. In a May 1943 speech, Robert Ley, head of the German Labor Front, declared that we will not give up the struggle until the last Jew in Europe is annihilated and dead. So let's first discuss the Jews that lived in Shanghai. Wait a second, Shanghai in China? What did the Nazis have to do over there? Well, two things. First of all, many Jews that fled Europe ended up in Shanghai, China, and eventually Shanghai was conquered by the Japanese, allies of the Nazis. The Chinese consul Ho Fengshan in Vienna issued German exit visas in the years 1938 through 1940 against the policy of his ambassador. The same did the Dutch consul Jan Zwartendijk and the Japanese consul Shuin Shigehara in Lithuania. There were already Jewish congregations in Shanghai, including those that were established after the Russian Revolution. In all, about 9,000 German, 4,500 Austrian, 1,000 Polish and 250 Czech Jews made their way to Shanghai as refugees. From 1937, after a vicious battle, the city was occupied by Japan, but Jews continued to live in relative freedom. Japanese leaders did subscribe to an anti-Semitic theory depicting Jews as global political conspirators, but this belief initially led them to treat the Jews well, hoping to win favor from these supposed power brokers of international politics. Yet in the aftermath of Pearl Harbor and the entry of the United States in the war, things changed. In November 1942, a process of ghettoization was set in motion in occupied Shanghai. Other anti-Jewish policies by the Japanese were undertaken, for example in occupied Manchuria and occupied Philippines. And the Germans, they supported the Japanese with anti-Jewish propaganda, hoping they would join the fight against the USSR. Now, the ghettoization measures did not apply to all the Jews that lived in Japan, only those that had arrived after 1936. It is said that SS officer Josef Meitziger, the chief representative of the Nazi Gestapo in Japan, suggested this and proposed the extermination as well. There is no documentary evidence of a German plan or policy to exterminate the Jews of Shanghai. So the Jews of Shanghai were mostly left alone and continued their lives. The ghetto was liberated on the 3rd of September 1945, and after the establishment of the State of Israel, many Jews migrated to the Middle East. Eventually, around 2,000 Shanghai Jews died over the course of the war. Let's take a look at North Africa, because from November 1942 till May 1943, the Germans, they occupied Tunisia. The policy against Tunisian Jews was different than it was in Europe, insofar as the Jews of Tunisia, abused and enslaved although they may have been, were not systematically murdered. They were, however, enslaved and economically exploited. They were also threatened to be killed if they dared to escape, and many of them had to wear the yellow Star of David. Einsatzgruppe Tunis under Walter Rauff did engage in ad hoc murders, and some Tunisian Jews were deported to the death camps in Europe. The rations that were given to the Jews in Tunisia were not as low as that were given to, for example, Jews living in occupied Poland. These were given starvation rations. It is said that the Einsatzgruppe Tunis division did have plans to launch a full extermination in North Africa, but eventually events overtook them as the Germans were defeated there. However, there is no documentary evidence that such plans actually existed. Paired with the fact that the Einsatzgruppe Tunis did not, as a matter of historical fact, systematically murder the Jews of Tunisia in its 6 months occupying that country. This supports the interference of a different policy for North Africa and indeed all non-European Jews as compared with European Jews. This conclusion is fortified by the absence of any documentary evidence of planned extermination operations in North Africa. However, while there is no documentary evidence for an ongoing wartime plan or policy to exterminate the Jews of North Africa, there is limited documentary support for a general German intention to do so in the future at some unspecified future date. And what happened to North African Jews that lived in Europe? Thousands of them, they ended up in the death camps alongside European Jews. Now let's take a look at British Mandatory Palestine. The area was under Ottoman rule till World War I, and then the British took it over. Now already during the First World War, they expressed their willingness to create a homeland for the Jewish population there. As Jewish migration to the area increased, so did tensions with the local Arab population. Let's discuss the Nazi policy towards Palestine. In the first years of the Nazi regime, Hitler wanted to encourage Jewish migration to Palestine under the terms of the so-called Haavara Agreement, signed between Zionist Jews and Nazi Germany on the 25th of August 1933. About 60,000 German Jews immigrated to British Mandatory Palestine. Jewish nationalism was initially supported by the Nazis as it provided them with an effective segregation from the Aryans. Initially, Hitler did not have much sympathy for the national aspiration of the Arab Palestinians, because before World War II he envisioned an alliance with Great Britain. He also saw the Arabs as an inferior race. During the 1936-39 Arab Revolt, Germany ignored Arab Palestinian requests for material assistance. Things changed, however, after the outbreak of World War II, because then Jews that lived either in the German Reich or in the occupied territories were forbidden to leave the area. Hitler found an ally with Hajj Amin al-Husseini, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem. Hitler promised al-Husseini that following German victory in North Africa, the Levant, and victory over the Soviet Union in the Caucasus, Germany would move to exterminate the Jews of Palestine. There are, however, conflicting accounts. One account confirmed what I just read, but another one said that Hitler claimed he wanted to destroy the power protecting the Jews in Palestine, meaning defeating the British. In June 1942, there was a planned establishment for Einsatzkommando Egypt that would accompany the German advance into Egypt and eventually Palestine. The plans for Einsatzkommando Egypt were set aside after the Allied victory at the Second Battle of El Alamein. Some historians have pointed out that the establishment of Einsatzkommando Egypt was the proof that the Nazis were planning to extend the final solution to the Middle East. The unit was to be led by Walter Rauff, a leading murderer of European Jews, and the Einsatzgruppen as a whole played a pivotal role in murdering the Jews of Europe, murdering well over 1 million Jewish civilians in the occupied Soviet Union. But the presence of the Einsatzgruppen within a region is not proof of an extension of the final solution therein. Because the Einsatzgruppe, they also operated in Poland 1939-1940, and yes, they committed mass murders, but not a planned extermination. They did so in the Soviet Union. Yes, do notice that Einsatzgruppe Tunis did not carry out such policies in North Africa. And do notice that by June 1942, the Germans were abandoning the method of mass shootings, as they did in the USSR, because it was psychologically exhausting for the men that had to carry out these murders, and therefore this method was deemed ineffective. Gassing was now introduced. And lastly, the number of soldiers to be deployed in Einsatzgruppe Egypt was to be 24. Yes, that's right, 24. Of course, 24 armed evil men can cause a lot of damage, but cannot carry out a systematic extermination of all the Jews living in North Africa and the Middle East. A corps of thousands of SS men operated in the Einsatzgruppe in the USSR, which excluded members of the Wehrmacht assisting and local collaborators. However, the Nazis did anticipate exterminating Jews outside Europe at some future date. There is no serious evidence of concrete plans or policies to implement this vision. Also, perpetrators Eichmann, Hutz and Ralph, when on trial, never spoke about policies against Jews in North Africa or the Middle East and only referred to the order to exterminate Jewry in Europe. One can reasonably predict that the Nazi exterminations would have, eventually at some point, extended to all Jews under Axis control, including outside of Europe. But during the war in history as it actually unfolded, there was neither an ongoing nor imminent plan to carry this dream out. Now, this Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, Al-Husseini, he played an interesting role regarding the Bosnian Muslim Waffen-SS division. I made a video on the SS Hanscha. Click right here and click here for my video about what the Germans actually knew about the death camps. Thanks for watching. I see you later.